Hey, my name is Alec Wenzel, and today I'm going to do a short lesson on how to sort of use more of the guitar. And what inspired me to think about this is that I haven't really put out a video since early January, and the reason is because I was on tour for most of January with Andy Sito, flying into Nashville and going out with him. We were all over the Southeast and it was a lot of fun. But then when I had come back, I'd planned a small hiking vacation with my girlfriend. And on the first day, I fell on my left arm pretty badly and got a small fracture right here at the top near my elbow. Now, it wasn't that serious. I didn't need a cast or any kind of surgery or anything, but at the same time, I couldn't really use my left arm for much. And I really only had mobility after the first week of healing kind of in these first, frets here from sort of the 6th fret forward. I was able to keep my gigs by, communicating with my band leaders and muddling through with what I was capable of doing, and people were comfortable with that. So I thought I would talk about what that process was like. So some exercises we'll sort of cover is one where you're just finding the notes on each string. There's no name for that exercise. It's just you do it and you learn where those are. And then some caged method ideas, how to play chords in sort of unconventional ways or ways that we wouldn't normally think of. And then sort of where you can use scales that are outside of our normal patterns in order to have access to some melodies and stuff like that as well. Now, this advice is not targeted at only people who have hurt themselves and need to get through gigs, because there's good concepts in here for anyone from a beginner to an advanced player. These are things that we all need to know how to do and things that can just help us generally. But, like I said, if you need to get through a gig and you can only play in certain places of the guitar, this is for you. Or, if you're somebody who's still learning the fretboard, this is also for you. So let's talk about how I was able to use some of these exercise ideas to muddle through when I was injured and can only really play in certain places. And the starting spot for this is knowing where all the notes are on the fretboard. Now, Corey Wong recently put out like a, fun little Instagram reel about this that I thought was kind of funny, but it's a good idea and it had me thinking about like what I was doing to get through. And this first sort of idea of learning where all your notes on the fretboard is an exercise. And like I said, there's not a name for it. It's just something you practice doing. Now, the sort of advanced version of this would be starting from just a note on your low E. I'm going to pick G flat. So I'd find G flat on the low E, 2nd fret G flat. And then I'd find it on my A string. G flat is in the 9th fret of my A string. And then I'd find G flat again on my D string, 4th fret. And then I'd find G flat again in the 11th fret of my G string. And then I'd find G flat again at 7th fret of the B string. And then G flat will again be 2nd fret of my high E string. Because again, 2 E's, right? It's going to be in the same spot. So if you wanted to challenge yourself, you could find it an octave up, and that would be the 14th fret of the high E. So that's the sort of more advanced version of this, being able to find it from just any note that you kind of pick randomly. But if you're a beginner and you're just starting out doing this, try picking like your open strings first and figuring that out. Because that'll at least give you a couple of freebies, right? Because we use some of these ideas for tuning when we don't have a tuner. So that would be finding notes starting from my open low E. So I play an open low E. There it is. That's an E note. Then I need to find that E somewhere else. Well, E is in the 7th fret of the A string. E is in the 2nd fret of the D string. E is in the 9th fret of our G string. E is in the 5th fret of our B string. This should be familiar because we use B in the 5th fret to tune our high E. And then we'd have our open high E, right? So if you're doing E's, you get 2 freebies, right? Because you have 2 open E's, and then you find E on each other string in between. And then we go and we do it again from our open A string. So we should know that A is in the 5th fret of our low E string, because we again would use this to tune. 5th fret of our low E string is an A. So there's another example, and I will just go through and find some more A's for you. So A, 5th fret low E, open A string. Then we would find A again, 7th fret of the D string. Then we'd find A again, 2nd fret of the G string. Then we'd find A again, 10th fret of our B string, and then again our freebie, 5th fret of our high E string, because again, 5th fret of the low E string. And again, here's that challenge, go find it an octave up. 17th fret is an A note. So this is that exercise, right? We want to start doing it from any note, right? If we're advanced enough where we can find it from any point. But if you're new to this, start with your open strings and find them that way. This will help with tuning and also sort of giving you a launching off point, right? Because if we wanted to find G flat like my example, if I know where all my G's are, then G flat would be a half step lower than that, right? If we were finding G's, you can sort of get there that way. All right, so that's kind of our first little exercise on how to use more limited spaces on the guitar, right? It's knowing where all of our notes are, right? It's really important. I highly recommend that you work on that. And then this translates to the next one, which will be knowing where all of our chords are if we're trying to play chords in unconventional ways. All right, and so knowing all the notes on your fretboard kind of leads into this next idea, which is knowing how to play chords in places that are a little bit different or sort of more unconventional, right? Now this starts with being able to play your bar chords in multiple places, right? So we'll start with just a G bar chord, right? Because I'd kind of said I couldn't really play a G cowboy chord when I had first had this injury. So I was looking for ways to just play my chords in other places. And the way we sort of get started with this is, can you play your bar chords in two different places, right? These are both G's. And this is using the idea that we have sort of two sets of standard bar chords, right? We have our E-shaped standard bar chords where we're barring and we're making an E shape, or we have our A-shaped standard bar chords. And we get either majors or minors based on whether we're using an E major shape or an E minor shape, right? Or an A major shape or an A minor shape. But this sort of next idea goes a little bit beyond that, because we don't just want to be able to do this with bar chords, because that still becomes a little bit more limiting. And we have to have the space to play that bar chord in a specific place, right? If we've only got two options. So how do we expand those options? Well, we expand the options by using what's called the caged method. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of the caged method when I was first learning. It felt kind of superfluous, but as I, sort of got older, I saw its uses and how these different voicings could give you new interesting patterns to fit into, arrangements or play a different part that lets you stand out in a mix, right? Especially if there's two guitar players. So what is the caged method? Well, the caged method is the idea that we take our sort of open position cowboy chords, our C, A, G, E, and D chords, and then sort of be able to play them further up the neck, right? And sort of know what chords those are creating with those shapes. A great example of how I use this is in one of those first rehearsals back. We were sort of playing in the key of A flat, and, I needed to play this sort of E flat, D flat, and then A flat progression, right? And the way I did that was because I couldn't necessarily bar very well, as I used the cage method to sort of play a C-shaped E flat chord like this in the 6th fret. I played a D flat using this A shape. And then this isn't included in the caged method, but it's this idea that we use a lot. It's this sort of F shape that we use up top here. I was using it a few frets up to play an A flat major chord. Now this is technically your E shape, right? It's just the top half of your E shape. But we commonly see it down here as a beginner F chord in our first 3 frets, and that's all fair game for moving up. Now the reason that this doesn't really count is because our F chord is technically supposed to be a bar chord, and when we're playing that easy F, we're just taking the inside of that F chord. But that system still applies as we move further up the fretboard, right? Now, the caveat of the caged method is that you have to practice being very accurate. You can't just be, swinging wildly at these chords, because it's going to be using some open strings and, things that you may not ringing out. That's what our bar usually covers, right? But it's good for you to practice that accuracy and be able to use those chords in that sort of situation, right? C, A, and an F shape, technically an E shape, but using here it is using it here as an F shape. So the first things we want to do are find all of our notes on every string, and then once we're able to do that, we can then start using the caged method to move chords into different parts of the guitar and use voicings that might be a little bit more interesting. Another way we could do that is, here's our E flat up here, here's our D flat down, then here's our A flat using a sort of D chord shape, right, to get our A flat chord. So yeah, try using that. Try figuring out how to use the caged method to approach different chord progressions after you feel comfortable knowing all of your notes on the fretboard. This is another way to use your limited space on the guitar. All right, and then finally, the third thing I said was, how are we going to use scales to sort of fit ourselves into different parts of the guitar? And really, I have a whole video on this that I'll link on screen and down below. It's another lesson video that you can check out about linking your pentatonic scales together. And what this does is this lets us play the same pentatonic scale in different locations on the guitar. And it's also a just great exercise for building speed and knowing where you are on the fretboard, and giving you other locations to sort of jump to. So I would appreciate if you went and watched that lesson instead. It's going to have way more in-depth information about this idea. But for instance, right, if I wanted to play an A minor pentatonic scale, I can look at the reflections on either side of the pentatonic scale, and by knowing the notes in the pentatonic scale, which we cover in the very first part of this, we should be able to find notes on our entire fretboard. We can figure out what notes are in this scale and then move it around on either side of the scale and then continue that pattern further up and down the neck. So that might look something like this. Here's sort of the reverse reflection of that A minor pentatonic scale I just played. Then we go up to where I just was, the normal position. Then we have another one right here. Then we have another one right here. Then we have another one right here. And then we're back to what we had just played down here, an octave higher. And then finally we have our 17th fret A minor pentatonic, which is again kind of our more normal pentatonic, just an octave up. So these are ways in which you can move around scales in a way that will give you access to them on different parts of the neck. So I was able to play any of the scales that I needed really in here by just knowing all of my little pentatonic reflections, or, you know, alternate pentatonic positions, sort of a good way to refer to them. So learn those as well. You can't be really versatile unless you sort of have a command of putting anything that you want to play anywhere on the fretboard, and that's a good way to practice it. All right, and once again, my name is Alec Wenzel, and these were my sort of 3 pieces of advice for how to get yourself more comfortable playing in different positions on the guitar. Whether that be because you have a small injury and you can only play in a certain spot, or if it's just because, you know, you're playing in a bigger band and you need to move your part or arrangement around to make things more interesting. These are all great ways to approach that. If for some reason you're playing with another guitar player and you're both playing this, then use the cage method and figure out a way to play that further up the neck so your arrangement sounds bigger and wider, right? You know, you could do something like this. Here's my G to C chord again, except we're going to do it with a D shape all the way up the neck here. Same sort of pattern, same sort of idea, but now you're covering this sort of different end of the sonic spectrum, and that's going to make things sound, you know, just more interesting. And it'll be fun for you to like try to figure out those parts and, you know, contribute to the group in that way. Like I said, those 3 pieces of advice are: be able to find all your notes all over the fretboard and practice doing it just when you're tuning your guitar. That's an easy way to sort of get started on that journey of learning all those notes. Then once you know all those notes, you can sort of use the caged method to move chord shapes that we're very familiar with to other parts of the guitar, right? Right? also knowing all of your scales in different positions, right? Watch that pentatonic video lesson I did. It uses some exercises from Matthias Assato that I think are really interesting to really help you learn where you can put these sort of different pentatonic positions so that you have access to any of those notes that you learned in many different places and always having a pattern to access them. If you liked what I said today, please like and subscribe. Thank you to anybody who subscribed in the interim. I don't plan on being gone for 6 weeks at a time, but sometimes life happens. You get hurt, there's work, you're trying to pay attention to your family. That's life. But if you want to catch more of my lessons and more of my gear reviews going forward, please hit that like and subscribe button. It means the world to me when you do, and it really, really helps me out. Thank you for watching this today, and I'll be back making more videos this week, so hopefully we'll see those again on a more consistent basis. At least one a week, right? We're going to get at least one a week. I'm hoping for 2, but at least 1. So yeah, stay safe, don't get hurt, have fun playing the guitar, and practice these things and try to better yourself, get access to more of your instrument. Thanks so much and have a great day.